Hey, it's Julia. Thanks for joining me. Today I'm working on a redraw of this ring sheet avatar piece that I drew about a year ago or so. I'm actually in the process of launching my art business, and I thought this piece would make a really cool print. And I originally was just going to repaint on top of the old version, but after looking at it, there were just too many anatomical and perspective issues that were bothering me, so I ended up just scrapping it all and starting from the beginning. Now, as I do that, a topic that I've been really meaning to talk about for a while now is this paralyzing fear I've had in the past of being perceived as cringe or feeling cringe for sharing my art and stories. This fear and kind of mindset honestly has been with me for a while, and I think it's held me back in a number of ways, particularly revolving around my authenticity and just being able to show up as my most authentic self, both in real life and with my art. A lot of our shame and embarrassment, I think, often stems from a place of vulnerability. The fear of being rejected or alienated from others can make us want to hide or protect who we are and, what we like. Something I've come to realize recently is that vulnerability can look very different for each person. I feel like we usually associate vulnerability with having difficult conversations and emotions or, exposing our weaknesses. While I'm not perfect at it, I'd say relatively speaking, I'm pretty good at reaching out to my friends when I'm having a tough time. And I'm sharing my weaknesses to a bunch of strangers on the internet. However, I am really bad, or at least before the work I've done this year, I was really bad at sharing my interests with people. That has been something super vulnerable to me. I used to be really afraid of the assumptions that people might make of me based on what I like. Generally, I did not tell people things I liked unless 1, I knew they also like it, 2, it's popular enough that most people probably like it or respect it at least, or 3, I feel comfortable enough that they won't judge me for my interests. The best example of this was when I was in school and we do introductions or whip arounds, icebreakers, whatever you call them, and the question would be like, what's your favorite TV show or movie? Something basic like that. I would literally gauge the room and try to pick something I liked, but also that the most amount of people in the room would also agree with. I usually landed on something like Avatar: The Last Airbender or Ghibli films, which isn't a lie, they're probably the most influential pieces of media when it comes to me, my art, and animation, but they're also what I'd call safe interests. I would never tell someone I just met, at least in the past, that I really love K-pop. And Doctor Who is one of my favorite shows. There was this kind of need to justify or clarify why I like what I do to attempt to be avoided as seen as cringe. There's this notion that I enjoy it, but not like that. I was so afraid of people's judgment and wanted to avoid being labeled a certain way at all costs. This is trademarked social anxiety. It's just that it got to a point that I started questioning, why am I so hyper aware? Why does this bring me so much shame? And why in particular am I so afraid to be seen as cringe? And moreover, why do I admire people who own up to what they love unabashedly without having to prove anything? I think those type of people are genuinely really cool. This one Ocean Vuong quote bounces around my head rent-free, and it's, "To be gorgeous, you first must be seen, but to be seen allows you to be hunted." It touches on this idea that to really connect with other people, you do have to expose yourself to a degree, but at the same time, it puts you in a position that, unless you have this unwavering belief in yourself, you might be rejected or made fun of, which is tough to digest. And I guess it was really hurtful to me in the past when I've shared something that meant a lot to me and someone else misunderstood it or downplayed it. And then a step up in terms of vulnerability for me from sharing my interests was sharing my art and specifically original characters and stories. Because not only do they touch on things I really love, but there's also this additional element of myself in each of the characters. So yeah, if you're my friend and I talk about everything I watch and read and that just means I really trust you. And if I tell you my story ideas, That's literally peak trust. To an extent, I feel like I am exposed when I share my stories. I think there's this element of embarrassment and cringe in sharing original stories and art, or just putting yourself out there for anything, even if you don't feel ready, because we really don't want to be seen as bad, you know? And a big part of that is not wanting to be seen specifically as a beginner. It's why sometimes when you look back on old art you've done, you might find it really cringy. And for some reason in our society, it is often embarrassing and almost humiliating to be seen trying and to be, generally earnest or passionate about something. Cringe is often that embarrassment that comes from being judged for not following the mold or being good enough. I have a hypothesis. So let's say not the best written script is given to two different webcomic artists. One that's maybe still getting the hang of the fundamentals versus a highly skilled artist. I bet the highly skilled artist likely would get praised for the same exact story, while the other may be seen as cringe, even if, they're telling the same exact thing. And I think this mostly has to do with our perceptions of them being a beginner. Problem with all this, as that one quote goes, until you're ready to look foolish, you'll never have the possibility of being great. In order to be a really skilled artist or writer or creator, you first have to go through the mortifying ordeal of being a beginner and making shitty art or making mistakes. But I think if we're too hyper aware of how our art is perceived, it prevents us from wanting to make more stuff and exploring and improving. And social media, to a degree, has exacerbated this fear because you're showing your work often earlier and to a wider audience. I actually got a comment on one of my TikToks that was like, I can't take people with OC seriously. After I got this initial, not anger, but like a, why do you feel the need to comment this? I realized how dumb that sounds. Like every other piece of media you've consumed begins with an original character. Maybe just because it was not a white dude in a studio doesn't change the fact that they're OCs. And secondly, I kind of felt bad for this person. Like, where is your sense of fun and empathy and connection? I think another kind of reason why talking about my characters is so difficult for me personally is because generally they revolve around queer or sapphic stories. And that's not something I personally find shameful, but historically, romance and slice of life is a genre that gets a lot of slack. Yes, it is notorious for its tropes and questionable publishing, but isn't that the case for any genre? I'm not going to touch on the fact that it's a female-driven genre because that's a bigger can of worms, but I'm just drawn to character-driven stories with an emphasis on character growth, which is why often slice of life and romance is so compelling to me. My personal opinion is that too many stories get bogged down in the tiny plot details that I don't always end up feeling attached to the characters. And so getting more representation, especially queer stories that don't exclusively focus on their queerness, is something that I'm passionate about. And not to be like back in my day, but growing up, I didn't see much of this kind of content. I'm making the stuff that younger me would want to see. However, at some point, I internalized the fact that drawing my little gay characters is cringe and frankly unprofessional. Despite the fact that there's literal professionals that do that and they're praised for it, but they can do that, I can't. There's a difference. I'm not good like them, There was a brief point where I almost entirely stopped making original content or story content. I felt this pressure to conform and only post art that would seem suitable for a company or something or would trend well. And it's taken me a lot of unlearning to say, so what? Literally, so what? So what if my stories and my characters are too self-indulgent or self-referential or too niche or just weird? And honestly, so what if someone else finds my stuff cringe? I'm not any less of an artist or a professional or a person for it. I'm not. And vulnerability can be clumsy, but it's the only thing worth anything. I'd argue when you feel the most cringe about your art, it's the work that's most important to you because it's meaningful to you or it's something that brings you joy. If you were completely indifferent to it, you wouldn't be feeling this way. Now, if other people's work makes you cringe, I think it's also worth asking yourself why and just maybe examine that a bit deeper. When I was in art school, I found plenty of people cringe. On some hand, maybe it was a bit warranted, maybe in situations where a lack of awareness led people to be like rude in a critique or to a professor. But in other situations where people were just very eager to share their work or were at different stages of skill, well, I don't think that was as warranted. I guess what I'm trying to say is that it's okay to do what makes you happy if it's not hurting anyone. It's fine to be indulgent if it brings you joy, and it doesn't matter if your work is bad or campy or weird, because the actual act of creation is so important. We will never be free from other people's judgment, so the least you can do is let go of the judgment you hold for yourself. You don't need to justify yourself to anyone. Plus, I guarantee you, at least a few people out there in the world would actually adore your ideas. There's an audience for your art, it just might be tough to find sometimes. If I keep putting myself out there, maybe someday someone will find it. Anyway, at the start of each year, I like to pick a simple goal to set the tone for that year. This year, it was to abandon shame and embrace curiosity. And I can tell you that halfway through the year now, I've made a lot of progress. I have slowly been letting go of the need to explain myself and stop caring about whether or not my art is palatable to everyone. I've also been more comfortable telling people things I enjoy and have opened up a bit more with my story ideas. Lately, I haven't felt very cringe when it comes to my OCs, but I've definitely felt cringe uploading to YouTube, probably because I still very much am a beginner at it. There's times where I upload a video and I just genuinely feel like bashing my head against a wall. Or when a friend tells me they've been watching my videos, I have to suppress the urge to throw my phone across the room. But hey, I'm doing it anyway. You know, if you think it's cringy of me to make videos with the hopes to connect with others, to build an art community, to put my art out there, you know, like, what does that say about you? You know what? And yeah, maybe my early videos won't be great, but if I stop now, how will I improve and grow? I find that by embracing myself and my interests wholly, the more comfortable I get in my skin. And not only that, but as a result, I become even more open and non-judgmental towards other people. You know, eventually, I really want to get to this point where I am just so comfortable in myself that it makes other people feel open to be themselves as well. So yeah, go out there, have fun genuinely, find what brings you joy and makes you feel like yourself, do the stuff that feels scary and vulnerable, make the most insane or depressing OCs or fun fan art, and even if the cringe doesn't go away, don't let that dictate you. Like whatever, we all die in the end. Basically, to sum this all up, to be cringe is to be free. Thank you for listening, go out there and make some art. Peace out.